Hello and welcome. And now let's speak a little bit about the 31st verse called Eton Mess, Eton, you can see, from the book Footprints on Water Spring. Now, this verse sings about healing and how healing cannot be confined in an apparent practice or in an apparent therapy. And healing is simply that apparently, of course, in the story of this apparent dual dream, that healing is compassion. Healing is that vast freedom and embrace which seems to not only embrace that trauma but also appear as it, and they without there being anyone performing it. So it's not that, it's simply, it's the tears, it's the fears, it's that sadness or that trauma or that alive restlessness or sadness or whatever that appears as trauma, and that appears as that embracing formlessness that embraces it and appears as it, embraces it. And in this apparent story of trauma and abuse, that is apparently what is seems to be healing. Now there are three parts to this, and I have used the dessert Eton Mess, which was apparently accidentally made in Eton College. So I've used that as a symbolic for abuse and healing and trauma. So there are three parts to it. It's a very long story in verse, and I think it'll be a very long video if I were to read out the whole thing, but I'll try and get as much as I can because it's quite an amazing verse. Eton Mess, Part 1. Three friends, strawberry, egg, and cream, recorded their ordeal and their dreams. The egg in full detail did write of how was split the yolk and white. The strawberry expressed how she bled and how she wished she were dead. Of being whipped, the cream did voice, bore torture, for she had no choice. Lashed till high peaks replaced soft glow, indeed, a very messy show. All had aimed to glow otherwise, but were by life surprised. So, deceived by life, its scheme, redundant had become their dreams. Then, fortune seemed to play a part, and life that seemed to fall apart was treated by the sweet advice of sugar, acclaimed as the wise. The stories were then merged in one, a big mess. All appeared undone. But on being eaten, proclaimed all. It's a desert that enthralls, which led to the interest of royalty, ensuring enormous popularity. They pompously trotted across the globe, messy but in their finest robe, recounted and sold their stories at length, were admired for their struggle and strength. Their book became a bestseller. It stressed the self, the seeming dweller of forms, was relatable and mesmerized with its account, which did polarize life, its seeming incidents, and stressed the self's predicament. Now we go on to the part two, where in this verse, how they approach a you could call teachers or therapists who seem to deem that this dual dream can somehow be, you could say, healed by practices and by highlighting that how the self is not very capable of healing itself, and how the me becomes the actual issue, you could say. Part 2. Later, when dimmed their popularity and most refused to buy the same story, surfaced the inner scars in amorphous feelings bowed. Thus, sniffled the strawberry at every opportunity, while the egg got nervy and anxious, and the cream turned obnoxious. For trouble seemed the trio with their previous messy blow to heal their wounds of yesteryears, to be the one beyond the fears, the friends approached the Pavlova, who spoke of foibles of mind's flavor. The Pavlova was stern and clear, declared in his address austere. A story always captivates, if messy, popular, and great. And then I can compare my life, stage it as calm or full of strife, be grateful to a noble god, or bond with fable truly odd, or demean other doubtful souls, condemn those who claim to be, commend those who claim to be whole. Pity victims, the seemingly flawed, thus create a hierarchical squad. Speaks of how pity for whatever, is simply the dual dream, or traverse from the other side, seek notice as a victim, thus preside, and blame insular destiny for treating me with levity, thus seeking attention constantly by being the victim energy. Now, this is how it is when people speak of healing and how the self is condemned and how it leads to, apparently, of course, this is all in a story, how it seemingly seems to create more of stress, more of trauma, apparently, of course. Loss followed by a win scenario is viewed with a higher success ratio. For when life seems to smoothly flow, comfort akin to my struggle low. Then inspire the ones stuck in strain, make hope and faith appear to reign, and show the way to success by capitalizing the mess. Thus ensure constant attention on self and its extension. This can be apparently seen a lot in, apparently in social media today anyway. The self thus builds on seeming tales, strengthens the separation's veil, remains entranced in its account, considers itself paramount. In this way, the self does stay and regenerates in the play, then suffers its own existence, wishes home of joyous non existence. And this can be seen how the self is apparently always blamed for being the illusion that has to be somehow got rid of, or somehow it can achieve something if it calms down, or if it seems to ignore its trauma or comes to terms with it or surrender. Of course, I'll read this. It might be a long one, I guess. This construed self is subtle a creep, for it ensures unconscious sleep, which goes deep in all its claims of entities with real names, which are endowed with volition, living in time traditions. And though complete is each state, confined self seems to be frustrated, believing it'll become whole when sated are wants of the soul, with flavors that are only sweet, ignoring life's taste complete. A perfect paradigm your Eton Mess, displaying the self's distress and finesse. At once, and with a messy domain, relays a neat colossal campaign, seeks profits, blames from its throne's views, and seems to separate all its hues, benefits from its mess and sweetness, to stay at the heart of the press. But you need not endure this mess. Step out of your story and its stress in the spaciousness of this, to realize nothing is amiss. This will bring a revolution, a total dissolution into the energetic field, the presence which life does yield. For life appears in all flavors, even the horrid and the disfavored. The cause of the mind is in suffering, begetting jealousy, complaining, and constant comparison, the most potent poison. Yet no comparison does occur only when there is a self to its stir. So liberate from a self separate, the root of miseries dictate. By staying rooted in present, accepting freedom in the moment, as it is. Focus on formlessness, this essence that all forms does bless. For in self seizing there's liberation and total peace beyond vexation. Now see how this kind of advice or teaching just crushes. Now the three felt crushed by the advice of the Pavlova precise, for they failed to accept the moment, couldn't concentrate on the present, and somehow felt they were at fault for focusing on fables of assault. Moreover, they wished healing and a miracle appealing. Now, the part three speaks of what is healing, what's apparent healing, what's apparent compassion in this isness, you could say. Part 3. The quiet and compassionate bowl sensed how modern mystical goals overwhelmed the three, unveiled without words. I embraced your stress, heard, unheard, yet was untouched by a singular song. Now listen of seeming rights and wrong, because there is really no right or wrong. So all that right and wrong is seemingly a simply story. Though my life is an illusory dream, poised in a precipice of or smooth as a cream, and the wish to the that the present situation should be different in Woe's foundation, for in the linear perception of life, vital is each sensation, where each occurrence has a purpose in life and its apparent circus, as cited by the Pavlova, who sketches the self's flavors. Now, listen of this compassion. But what if upturned are all views? Exists no self or world to pursue the throne, or accept the true, or end itself and see anew, and once appearing as two. So there's no occurrence to, no continuity of event, no owners or ownership of content, but all is an appearance of energy, where seeming self is not an enemy. What if none's liable for feelings raw, or the seeking that does know? And there is none to have a choice to be silent or feelings thus voice, or to be strong or weak, or experience spiritual peak, for all appears on its own, without another to make it known. Besides, there's no one to know, there's none present in its show. And if no one is separate, how can it be annihilated? How can there be a personal story or one embroiled in the illusory? So, all this talk of that there is a self that's embroiled in a story and somehow that has to be get rid of seems to add more trauma, apparently, of course. But what if there are no techniques to find peace that's unique, and each rising appearance is love alone in semblance, while embracing its every tear, its every rising fear, and it alone does shine as presence of mine and thine. It crushes, is crushing, and the crushed, and yet remains completely untouched, yet cries in pain when crushed is its soul, cares, heals, redresses to, is whole, is complete in its essence, even when lacking in appearance, for all is one blessed song, even seeming rights and wrongs, where everything does thrive as it is, totally alive, a love and perfect poise, mess or not, seeming noise. To be precise, all is an impression of the unstruck sound and expression. Mm, or a sea of music, this messy appearance, in the embrace of volcanic silence, where one the sound in silence, or silence sounding as this appearance. So oneness doesn't dictate behaviors, for it is the self, the trait, and the endeavor, and is in all and beyond all views, linear, aerial, true, untrue. The friends, tinged by the spaciousness of the bowl, wished more for the mess, for now they seem to recognize that helplessness is not unwise, and sensitivity is a strength, the doorway to demise of illusion's length, resumed the illuminating insights, for the bowl's essence bright. I will always be there, as compassion, fair, unfair, as infinite boundlessness encompassing your distress, even your non acceptance or facade of acceptance, without any judgments, as love, unbound by events, healing you all beyond words wise, as empty infinity, which does rise, where healed will be your every grievance in the intimate embracing silence, which is not separate from you, but is this the presence in you. Yet, if you believe your story is true, pursue an upside down worldview and try to get to the source or end. Unrequited will be this dreamy bend. Redeeming the self, an impossible dream, like milk separating itself from cream. Still, if you feel you can change your mess by didactic exchange, heal by enlightened conversation, free the Eton mess of distinction. Here, Eton is ETON. Then together we shall seek the words, define the ineffable unheard. For I will always hold you with your mess of I am and I do. In all scenarios, love does not desert. Whether messy puddings, or neat desserts. So, eaten, E-T-O-N, or love or not, love does reign. Yet flavors rule the planet palate plane. And when eaten is love's pudding, then tastes alone do the bidding. So this was the poem. Of course, there's a last paragraph. The Eton Mess of Distinction heard the song without restriction, felt free, thanked the bowl for love's untouched flavor whole. So this love, where there is no distinction between the self or no self, and there is no bondage or freedom, simply this immediacy. Thank you.